So take time to reflect. Is her loyalty to you rooted in truth or in tactics? Does she speak in love or speak in layers? Do you feel freer in the relationship or more bound and confused? These questions matter, not because you're judging her, but because you're protecting yourself from a slow form of emotional erosion that can leave lasting scars. If you find yourself stuck in this dynamic, know this: you don't need to prove your worth by staying. You don't need to be emotionally drained just to show you care. A woman who loves you will never force you to choose between your peace and her approval. Let that truth guide you. Because when loyalty leaves and manipulation takes its place, the most loving you can do for both of you is walk away. A spirit that rejects accountability cannot build anything lasting. In any healthy relationship, accountability is a cornerstone. It means both people are willing to look inward, admit when they're wrong, and make the effort to grow. When a woman consistently avoids taking responsibility, when she deflects, blames, denies, or shifts the focus whenever she's called out, that's not just a bad habit, that's a deeper issue of pride, ego, and emotional immaturity. You may start to notice patterns. Every disagreement somehow becomes your fault. If she lashes out, it's because you pushed her to it. If she lies, it's because you didn't make her feel safe enough to tell the truth. If she's distant, it's because you didn't try hard enough to connect. In these moments, it becomes clear she's not seeking to understand or to repair. She's seeking to escape the discomfort of being wrong. And when someone consistently rejects accountability, what they're really saying is, I refuse to change for the sake of this relationship. It's dangerous because this attitude slowly robs the relationship of honesty. Over time, you begin to avoid bringing things up because you already know how it will go: defensiveness, emotional outbursts, or a cold shutdown. And so the cycle begins. You notice something's off. You try to communicate. She refuses to own her part, and you're left feeling unheard and blamed. That's not partnership. That's emotional stonewalling. Relationships require two people who are not only willing to love each other, but to grow with each other. Growth isn't possible without reflection. And reflection requires humility. If she always needs to be right, always needs to be the victim, always needs to win, then there's no room for mutual healing. Instead of resolving issues, they are buried under justifications and excuses. You can't build trust with someone who won't acknowledge when they've broken it. You can't build peace with someone who can't admit when they've caused pain. And you certainly can't build a future with someone who rewrites the past to make themselves look clean while making you carry all the weight. That's not love. That's self-preservation at the cost of connection. When a woman truly values the relationship, she will choose humility over ego. She'll be willing to look in the mirror and say, that was my fault. Or, I shouldn't have said that. Or, I need to do better. She won't see accountability as a threat. She'll see it as an invitation to grow closer, to be better, to love deeper. That kind of honesty creates a bond that lasts. But without it, the relationship becomes a cycle of blame, resentment, and distance. Refusing accountability also signals a lack of emotional maturity. Life will bring challenges, misunderstandings, and moments of failure. What defines a person's character is not but how perfectly they behave, but how they respond when they fall short. If she can't own her mistakes, she can't learn from them. And if she can't learn from them, the same issues will keep repeating, just dressed in new forms. This is especially dangerous for a man who is purpose-driven. You cannot afford to be tied to someone who refuses to grow. Purpose requires clarity. It demands emotional balance, spiritual strength, and the ability to navigate conflict in a way that produces peace, not confusion. A partner who avoids accountability will slow you down, pull you off track, and cloud your judgment. Not because she's evil, but because she's unwilling to do the inner work. At some point, you must ask yourself, is this relationship pushing me forward or pulling me back? Am I growing with her, or constantly trying to correct, explain, and defend myself? Am I in a partnership, or am I trapped in a cycle of blame? Love should feel like a safe place to be honest, not a battlefield where one person is always right and the other is always guilty. You deserve someone who is just as committed to growing as you are. Someone who will say, I'm sorry, without being forced. Someone who sees accountability not as an attack, but as an act of love. If she refuses to take responsibility, if every conversation feels like a trial, and if you're the only one doing the emotional lifting, then it may be time to let go. Because without accountability, there can be no growth. And without growth, love can't breathe. When her presence begins to diminish your purpose, it's time to pause and examine what the relationship is really doing to you. Purpose is not just a dream or a career, it's the deep sense of direction, the calling that fuels your life and gives meaning to your actions. A healthy relationship should support that, not suffocate it. But when the woman in your life becomes a constant sort of confusion, emotional fatigue, or spiritual heaviness, you have to be honest with yourself. Are you becoming more of who you're meant to be, or are you slowly drifting away from that version? It can begin quietly. You find yourself hesitating before taking a step that once felt natural. Maybe you used to be disciplined, driven, and clear-minded, but now you're second-guessing decisions, feeling drained after simple conversations, or battling anxiety you never used to feel. The energy you once poured into your goals is now being redirected into managing emotional drama, repairing unnecessary conflict, or recovering from the weight of her words. That isn't partnership. That's distraction. A woman who truly values you will not compete with your purpose. She will complement it. She won't pull you away from your calling with guilt, pressure, or subtle manipulation. Instead, her presence will inspire clarity. Her support will bring peace. Her love will feel like a firm foundation, not shifting sand. But if you constantly feel like you have to choose between peace and her approval, between your dreams and her demands, then her presence may be misaligned with your future. Purpose requires focus. It thrives in stability, and anyone who truly loves you will protect your clarity, not cloud it. But when a woman is more concerned with being the center of your world than encouraging your role in something greater, she begins to stunt your growth. You may find yourself spending more time fixing the relationship than building your life. You may start making compromises, not healthy ones, but the kind that chip away at your vision and identity. Over time, you start to lose your voice, your sense of self weakens. You begin to measure your value by how well you keep her satisfied, even if it costs you your inner peace. It's not that relationships should be effortless. Growth always includes challenges, but there's a difference between being challenged to rise and being pressured to shrink. If her presence consistently makes you feel like you're not enough, like you have to abandon parts of yourself to be accepted, or like your calling is an inconvenience to her comfort, then something is deeply off. Love should stretch you, not strangle you. It should sharpen you, not silence you. This is especially critical for a man who knows he was created for more. You can't fulfill your purpose while carrying emotional weights that were never yours to hold. If her presence causes constant detours, if you're always recovering from emotional wounds rather than building a life of meaning, you're not in relationship, you're in a war zone. And while love can heal many things, it cannot survive where purpose is suffocated. There comes a moment when you have to choose alignment over attachment. You have to ask, is this woman helping me grow closer to the man I'm supposed to become, or is she distracting me from that path? That's not a selfish question. It's a necessary one, because your purpose is not just for you. It's for the people you're called to lead, serve, and impact. And staying in a relationship that drains your potential doesn't just hurt you, it delays everything and everyone connected to your calling. When a woman loves you well, you'll know it by how you feel in her presence. You'll feel steady, not shaken. You'll feel motivated, not manipulated. You'll feel seen. Not just for who you are now, but for who you're becoming. She won't compete with your mission. She'll pray for it, support it, and walk beside you in it. But when that's missing and all that remains is conflict, confusion, and chaos, it's time to step back. You can't fully walk in purpose while constantly being pulled into emotional survival mode. So protect your peace, guard your focus, and remember, love that costs you your purpose is far too expensive. Let go of what distracts you so you can make room for what truly aligns. A man who has gone a long time without a relationship often doesn't realize the quiet shift happening within him. At first, solitude feels like peace. It feels like freedom, maybe even relief after past emotional struggles. He gets used to making decisions alone, coming and going as he pleases, and keeping his own counsel. But slowly, without even noticing, emotional isolation begins to take root, not because he has chosen to be cold or unloving, but because the need to connect deeply has been silenced over time. Emotions that once flowed freely in the presence of a partner now get tucked away. The desire to share the intimate details of his day, the little moments of joy or sadness, the need for encouragement, or even just to be heard, those things begin to shrink. He learns to keep his own secrets, to carry his own burdens, to be strong in a way that shuts others out. At first, this might feel like maturity. But in truth, it's often self-preservation dressed up as strength. It's the quiet belief that no one will understand, or worse, that no one really cares enough to try. The longer this pattern continues, the more emotionally distant he becomes, not only from others, but from his own feelings. He may become more stoic, more logical, and less expressive. He may even come to believe that emotions are distractions, that vulnerability is weakness, and that depending on someone is too dangerous. But the cost of this belief system is high, because while he avoids the pain of disappointment, he also forfeits the joy of true connection. Over time, it becomes harder to even imagine what it would feel like to be known and loved fully. His emotional world becomes a quiet room with locked doors. The human heart was not designed for long-term isolation. We are wired for connection, for empathy, for love that goes beyond surface interactions. When a man spends years without romantic intimacy, his capacity to bond doesn't vanish, but it does become harder to access. Like a language not spoken in years, the ability to express affection, to listen deeply, or to care sacrificially begins to fade. And this fading is dangerous because it can convince him that he doesn't need others, that relationships are optional or even burdensome. In this place of quiet emotional isolation, a man may also become more guarded. He might view new people with suspicion or indifference. He might assume that others wouldn't understand his journey or that opening up would only lead to pain. So he remains hidden even when someone sincere tries to reach out. It's not always pride, often it's fear. The fear of being misunderstood or of not measuring up or of being rejected again. So rather than risk it, he chooses the safety of solitude. But the truth is, emotional isolation is not a mark of strength. It is a symptom of unhealed wounds. It is the result of time passing without the healing presence of someone who truly sees and cares. The man may function well on the outside. He may work hard, show discipline, even lead others, but inwardly something tender is missing, and until that space is acknowledged and cared for, he will continue to walk alone, not because he must, but because he has grown too accustomed to it. Healing begins with awareness. It begins when a man dares to admit that emotional isolation has not made him stronger, only quieter. It begins when he is willing to look inward and ask himself if this solitude is serving him or simply protecting him from a fear he has yet to confront. It begins when he makes room, even just a little, for the idea that relationships are not distractions from his life, but rather the place where his deepest growth and healing can take place. No man is beyond the reach of love, but he must be willing to lower the walls he's built in the silence, and he must believe that being known is worth the discomfort of being seen. The longer a man goes without a relationship, the more his fear of vulnerability begins to grow, not always in obvious ways, but often quietly in the hidden corners of his heart. Vulnerability by nature requires exposure. It means showing someone else your true thoughts, your raw emotions, and your deepest insecurities. But when a man has been alone for a long time, he becomes less practiced in this act of emotional openness. What once may have come naturally now feels like a foreign language, one he's forgotten how to speak. At first, it's subtle. He tells himself he's just being cautious, that he's protecting himself, that he's waiting for the right one. But over time, caution hardens into avoidance. He begins to keep his thoughts to himself, convinced no one else would truly understand him. The idea of opening up becomes exhausting before he even tries. The emotional muscle that once reached for connection starts to atrophy from lack of use, and without even realizing it, he begins to live in a self-made shell, a place where he feels safe, but also alone. This fear of vulnerability often disguises itself. It might look like independence, like a strong and silent demeanor, or like high standards. He may say he's just focused on his goals or that he doesn't have time for distractions. But beneath these explanations is often a deeper fear, the fear of being seen for who he really is and not being accepted. The fear of revealing parts of himself that aren't fully healed, or of being misunderstood in ways that hurt more than being alone ever could. And this fear doesn't always come from trauma or heartbreak. It can also grow simply from prolonged absence. The longer he's unchallenged emotionally, the more foreign emotional connection becomes. He might even begin to convince himself that vulnerability is weakness, that a real man doesn't show emotion, doesn't depend on others, doesn't need to be comforted. And yet, deep down, the craving for genuine intimacy still exists. It's just buried beneath years of self-protection, and because it's been buried so long, it now feels unsafe to uncover it. The problem isn't that he doesn't want love. The problem is that the path to love, honesty, openness, humility has become steep and unfamiliar. Fear of vulnerability can also show up in perfectionism. A man who's been without a relationship for years may feel that before he can be loved, he must become flawless. He may place immense pressure on himself to have everything in order, the perfect career, the body, the perfect life plan. And when he falls short of these expectations, he retreats further, believing he's not ready or not worthy. He forgets that love is not something you earn by being perfect. It's something you receive when you're willing to be real. This kind of fear can also create a cycle. The man avoids vulnerability to protect himself, but in doing so, he avoids relationships. And in avoiding relationships, he misses out on the very kind of connection that could help him grow, heal, and experience joy. As time passes, the wall he built to protect himself becomes the very thing that keeps him trapped. And unless he becomes aware of this cycle, he may continue to repeat it, silently longing for connection, but too afraid to risk being known. Healing this fear starts with honesty. A man must begin to ask himself some difficult questions. What am I really afraid of? Who told me that being open was dangerous? When did I stop believing that someone could love me just as I am? These are not easy questions, and answering them doesn't guarantee immediate change. But it does create space for something different. It invites the possibility of courage, the kind of courage that doesn't roar, but whispers, try again. Real strength lies in the ability to be seen, to be vulnerable, and to love anyway. A man who chooses to open his heart after years of being guarded is not weak. He is brave, because it takes far more strength to risk being known than it does to remain hidden. And when he finally chooses vulnerability, he doesn't just open the door to a relationship, he opens the door to a fuller, richer life.